I am Haisten Willis, White House reporter with the Washington Examiner. Joining me today is Scott Kupor, Director of the United States Office of Personnel Management. Scott, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So we'll start with some of the big news for you is that you're actually in this role. You're still pretty new, sworn in less than a month ago as we speak. Tell us how things have gone in the role so far.
Yeah, so far so good. It took, despite the fact that it took almost 8 months to, be able to get into the building. It's been great so far. Look, I would say it's exactly what I'd hoped and expected it might be, which is I think we have a really great opportunity to help really create kind of a performance-based culture here in the government to really focus on things like merit hiring and compensation and all the good things that the president has directed us to do, with the goal of making sure that we can make civil service a really strong and coveted opportunity for people.
Very cool. And tell us, in some broad strokes, what are some of the big picture things that you want to do? What are some of the changes you're going to make?
Yeah, so there's really kind of three big things that we're focused on. So first is what I would call creating a high performance culture. And what that means to us is how do we make sure that we can attract and retain the best and the brightest, that we actually have real accountability for outcomes, that we make sure, again, managers are, doing what they need to do to help ensure career development and opportunities for people who are doing well. As you probably know, a lot of the kind of promotion system and kind of power system in government is based on tenure and based on size of the organization. And we really want to make this really focus on kind of the actual contributions of individuals from a merit principles basis. So that's kind of thing number one. Thing number two is really making operational efficiency a first-class citizen, not just in OPM, but also broadly throughout the government. So again, a lot of the problems as we look at the spend, problems that we have with government, in my mind, stem from the fact that, kind of oftentimes we really think about headcount as the logical solution to many problems. And there's no doubt that obviously there are some things for which adding more headcount makes sense. But in order to make operational efficiency a top priority, we need to think about the utilization of technology. We need to think about organizational changes to help drive efficiency. And we really need to create a culture where some element of innovation and some measured risk-taking is appropriate so that we can actually move the ball forward on efficiency. And then the final thing is the third thing that we're focused on is really around kind of what does the kind of talent network requirements for an AI first world require. And so I want to make sure that as AI becomes a really important technology broadly, both in the public and private sector, that the government has the right talent, the right resources to make sure that we can incorporate that into all the things we do to help drive not just kind of better service, but also increasing operational efficiency in our work.
Interesting. AI first. Wow. Now, on the headcount thing, I think your plan is to actually have a little bit of reduction in headcount. If you can tell us a little bit about those plans and how that's going to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in OPM alone, which is the division that we run, what we've told people is we started roughly with a little bit north of 3,000 employees and a significant number of contractors at the beginning of the year. There are still people filtering through because some of the programs like the DRP and other things that we've done kind of have a time-based element to them. But we expect that probably by end of the year, if we stay on plan, we'll be somewhere around 2,000 employees. So let's call it roughly about a third reduction in headcount. And some of those were, just unfortunate areas where, quite frankly, we just decided, look, we can't be all things to all people. And so I'll just give you a very simple example. We had a very good team that was doing ongoing executive education for, kind of executives in the government. And they did a great job. But unfortunately, in a time where we felt like we have to be more careful about spend, we just had to make a hard decision that we can't really support that type of activity anymore. So that's an example of something where we had a function that we were doing and we just decided that function, unfortunately, just doesn't, have the ability to be funded anymore. And then other areas, we were able to just look at are there ways to increase efficiency? The vast majority of that headcount that we will find ourselves down is really a function of the DRP, which is kind of the deferred resignation program that you may have heard of, and other voluntary leaving. So very small number, fewer than 200 of those 1,000 individuals that have left the organization were through essentially reductions in force.
Okay, cool. And I think also related to this, you guys just scored a pretty significant court victory in the American Federation of Government Employees versus Trump case. Tell us what that means and how that what that means for your agency.
Absolutely. So this is a really important case. So a very quick background for your viewers. It's long been established that, as you probably know, there's quite a significant amount of union-related employees government, I think it's something like around 60% or so of federal employees are
Wow.
unionized. So it's quite a big number.
Mhm.
But it's always been the case that the president has the authority to declare areas of national security importance as effectively free from union-based activity. And every president, with the exception of President Biden in history, has always kind of made designations of that sort. President Trump did the same thing and included it to include areas like Department of Defense, Veteran Affairs, things, again, that have a very clear nexus to national security. And that was challenged in the courts. It was in the Ninth Circuit out on the West Coast. And the challenge by the plaintiff said, hey, we think this is a First Amendment violation because we think the president just doesn't like unions and is essentially trying to silence us. We got a very positive victory that came out the other day through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So this is kind of, again, the appeals court in the Ninth Circuit. It was a unanimous decision that basically said, we're denying the request that the plaintiffs had for an injunction against the president's being able to carry out this executive order, and reiterated what we have always said was the very clear law of the land, which is that presidents have broad discretion to exclude certain agencies from being able to have union-based activity. And it's really important. Historically, what we've seen in some cases is the unions have been an impediment to the president's ability to execute on the important plans that he's doing. So, we were just talking obviously about headcount reductions. A lot of these agencies, of course, have decided that it's important for them to increase their efficiency and reduce headcount. And, obviously the unions were against that. And this really clears the path then for us to move forward with some of those areas and to make sure that we can obviously serve the American people as efficiently as possible.
Cool. And as far as, if you're just a average voter right now watching this, why is that important? And why does that matter to a typical voter, out in the States?
Yeah, it matters at the end of the day, which is, look, as we know, the president was elected with a mission. 77 million Americans, of course, obviously elected President Trump. And a key tenet of his mission was, how do we make sure that kind of federal workers are stewards to the taxpayer dollars and spend that money as efficiently as possible? And so it's very difficult in these areas where we had union representation to be able to do reductions in force, to be able to even remove what are called probationary employers, which is people who are kind of lesser tenured, who are very early in their tenure. Right. We've seen examples of in the VA, for example, there were about 4,000 employees who were fired for poor performance, who were union-based employees. And in prior years, the unions, fought to try to bring those people back and force reinstatement. Now we have the ability to kind of move forward on the things that are consistent with what the American people elected President Trump to do, which is to reform the federal government and make sure that, the tax dollars that we spend on behalf of the people are actually used as efficiently as possible.
Makes sense. Now, of course, the unions themselves are not happy about this. I have a quote from AFGE President Everett Kelly. He said the ruling was a setback for First Amendment rights in America, and they're vowing basically to keep fighting on. What's your response to that statement from him?
Yeah, look, this is not a setback for First Amendment rights. What this is just a very clear articulation of what has always been the legal standard, which is the president has very broad discretion to make decisions that impact national security. It's very clear in cases where, kind of the Department of Defense is doing activity, and that's clearly a national security area. And therefore, the president has broad discretion to do this. So this is actually really more of a reinstatement of kind of, quite frankly, what things were. The case they brought was a First Amendment case. But if you read the court decision, as I'm sure you've had, the court was very clear that, there is no First Amendment case here. And again, they just reinstated kind of the law of the land that broad discretion is applicable to the executive anytime we're dealing with national security.
Okay, makes sense. And one last topic before I let you go here, I wanted to ask about a memo you put out, I think just about a week ago, saying that employees are free to express their religious convictions in the workplace. Tell us about that and why you felt that it was necessary to issue that memo.
Yeah, we felt it was important because there had been a lot of questions, particularly from the last administration, about what was the state, again, of kind of the Supreme Court, legal opinions on this matter. Anything as simple as literally, could I, as an employee, put a Bible on my desk, or if I'm a Jewish, employee, could I put a mezuzah on my door frame and stuff? And there was a lot of confusion about it. And when you look again at what the Supreme Court has said on these topics, those types of displays are perfectly legal. And we wanted to make sure people understood that. And we want the workplace to be a place where people don't have to just kind of pretend to be, something else other than, what's important to them in terms of their religious beliefs. And so this is just really, again, I would say more of a clarification that says, hey, If you want to display a religious item, that's perfectly fine. We also made clear that, look, you can't interfere with the workplace. So, if you want to talk to people about religion or do, kind of, some type of meetings, all those things have to be done after hours, and they need to, take place where we're not obviously harassing individuals or interfering with the ability of other people to get the work done. So it's a very common sense memo, basically, that just makes it clear that religious expression, particularly in the form of demonstrating artifacts and items that are important to you, is really not anything that violates the law.
Yeah. And was this something that was in doubt? Were people kind of unsure if this kind of thing was allowed, and that was why you needed
Yeah,
to
that's
put
that's exactly right. Yeah, there was a lot of confusion, I think, from the last administration on this topic, and we had gotten a bunch of inquiries on it, and we thought it was important just to kind of set the record straight. So, look, we want people to be able to have the appropriate level of freedom of expression, again, as long as that obviously doesn't interfere with ultimately the work product that has to be done. And we feel like this memo and this guidance provides that benefit.
Okay. And you mentioned getting inquiries before you sent this out. What kind of feedback have you gotten in the day since it came out?
So far, it's been very positive. In this job, as I'm learning, you mostly hear from people when they're not happy. So very few people take the time to tell you thank you for doing that. So,
Right.
but we
Journalism
did get
too,
some
yeah.
of that. But in many cases, the absence of incoming email is the best affirmation you can get when you put out policies. And for the most part, that was exactly what we heard.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned email. We'll throw one more question here.
Of
I think
course.
you guys recently there was the famous 5 questions email from
Right.
basically back in the spring. You ended that practice officially. Tell us about that, why that decision was made.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what I told our team is, we think fundamentally that the responsibility of any manager in any organization is to obviously know what their team members are doing and to be able to be appropriately informed on that. And that was a tool that was available to people, but there's lots of other tools. So, I encourage people to have one-on-one meetings with their direct reports to make sure that they're communicating on email. So we felt like there were appropriate other mechanisms that could solve the same problem, which is making sure managers are properly informed of what people are doing. We put out guidance, to the rest of, kind of the other agencies to say, hey, look, if you find it useful, by all means, no one's preventing you from doing that. But OPM, as kind of the central, organization that was sending those things out and kind of collating responses, we made a decision that, we're not going to be involved in that. So this is now an independent agency decision as to whether they find utility in it. And if not, obviously, they're free to go do other things.
Cool, cool. Thanks a lot, Scott. I appreciate it.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Absolutely. This is Haisten Willis, White House reporter for the Washington Examiner. For more information on the Trump administration and everything else happening in politics, please visit washingtonexaminer.com.